In this video, we will look at the Cloud Notes desktop applications configuration and code. We will start with the Cloud Notes Executables configuration file. The audit ID is passed with every request and will show up in various logs. It identifies the source of the request. The clear logs on start determines if the Cloud Notes logs will be cleared when the desktop application starts, and the log source ID sets the value to use for the log source when creating logs. The provider configuration file name sets the name of the consumer provider configuration file to search for in the consumer provider packages, and the provider configuration packages path sets the directory where it can find the provider configuration packages. The register new user hash algorithm type and the register new user salt length sets the hash algorithm type and the cryptographically random salt length to use when creating a new user's dodSON core cryptography salted password. See the Programming with the dodSON core cryptography namespace video for more information about salted passwords. The selected provider configuration provides the name of the provider configuration which will connect to the note provider in the cloud. It will search the packages in the provider configuration package looking for the package with this identifier. The installation settings configuration group provides installation control information determining how packages will be installed. See the Programming with the dodSON core packaging and dodSON core installation namespaces video for more information about creating and installing packages. The log configuration group defines the parameters of the Cloud Notes log. See the Programming with the dodSON core logging namespace video for more information about logging. Now we will look at the consumer provider packages. Consumer provider packages contain the configurations and assemblies required to implement the consumer shared iConsumer Notes provider interface. Consumer provider package configurations are a multi-format configuration file. First, we will look at the Consumer Communication Bus Provider package configuration file. The first line indicates the name of the consumer provider, in this case, Communication Bus Provider. The next section is a comma-separated values table which describes the user interface elements in the dynamically created settings view. They include the display name for the control, the type of the control, the minimum and maximum values for the control if applicable, and the element name in the configuration that this control edits. We can see that the channel type, IP address, port number, and service name elements are items in the configuration below. See the dodSON core library help file, dodSON core delimiter separated values namespace for more information about creating, reading, and writing comma-separated values tables. The next line, which starts with a hashtag, indicates the end of the comma-separated values table and describes the type of serializer used to serialize and deserialize the remainder of the configuration file. This configuration is the custom configuration used to instantiate a consumer provider that can connect directly to a server in the dodSON core networking system. The RESTful Service Provider package contains the configurations and assemblies required to implement the Consumer Shared iConsumer Notes Provider interface. The configuration file provides a similar multi-formatted configuration file defining the name of the consumer provider, a comma-separated values table defining the elements in the dynamically generated user interface, the type used to serialize and deserialize the consumer provider configuration, and the consumer provider configuration used to instantiate an instance of the RESTful Service consumer provider. The Cloud Notes application is a WPF MVVM desktop application. We will begin by looking at the app XAML page. We specify startup, exit, and dispatcher unhandled exception methods and indicate that we will explicitly shut down the application. We merge this resource dictionary with the production resource dictionary. We can see here that the production resource dictionary and the debug resource dictionary describe various application level values to be used for either production release or debug release. The remainder of the resource dictionary describes various global styles used throughout the application. The application startup method will first attach a custom assembly resolve method to the current application domain's assembly resolve event. This will help .NET find custom consumer provider assemblies. Next, we display the splash screen. While the splash screen is displayed, we read the configuration file, get the log source ID from the configuration file, and create the log defined in the log configuration. When the log is created, we begin writing logs. Next, we will read the installation settings from the configuration and then install the consumer provider packages. Once all the consumer provider packages have been installed, we will scan the installation directories and load all of the consumer provider configurations. We will then use the selected provider configuration item value to search for the desired consumer provider within the loaded consumer provider configurations and instantiate a new consumer provider. Next, we will read the register new user hash algorithm type item and the register new user salt length item values. Finally, we will wait a bit to allow the splash screen to display. Depending on whether the consumer provider has been selected and configured, we will either show the settings window to allow you to select and configure a consumer provider, or attempt to log in to the selected consumer provider. If the splash screen is still visible, we will close the splash screen. Finally, if a consumer provider has been selected, we will create the login view model and inject it into the login view. Then we will inject the login view into the application window and show the application window. Otherwise, if no consumer provider has been selected, we will shut down the application. The Show Settings view is an internal method that will close the splash screen, create the settings view model, inject it into the settings view, and inject that into the connection settings window and display the connection settings window. This will allow you to select and edit a consumer provider. The application exit method will log out of the current consumer provider and close the logger. The application dispatcher unhandled exception method will log any unhandled exceptions, close the logger, and shut down the application. The rest of the code in this file consists of startup helper method. Please download the dodSON Software Distributed Programming Framework example help file and the code project seen in this video to view this code in more detail. The provider class is the code representation of the multi-formatted configuration file that represents a consumer provider. It includes the file name of the multi-formatted configuration file, the name of the provider, the dynamic user interface settings, the configuration serializer type, and the custom consumer provider configuration. The provider settings class is the code representation of a row in the dynamic user interface settings, separated values table. The static class common contains application-wide properties and methods. It provides properties defining the names and sizes of windows and buttons, properties that will format window titles, properties to hold the discovered consumer providers and the currently selected consumer provider, methods to log in and log out of the currently selected consumer provider, and various other housekeeping properties and methods. Please download the code project seen in this video to view this code in more detail. The connection settings window, the edit notes window, and the application window are simple WPF windows which set their data context to the injected user controls. The connection settings window takes the title prefix, the width and height of the window, and the user control to display. The user control will be a settings view that has been injected with a settings view model. The Edit Note window takes the title prefix, the width and height of the window, and a user control to display. The user control will be a note view that has been injected with either a new note view model or an edit note view model. The application window is a multi-use window. It takes a title prefix, the width and height of the window, and a user control to display. The user control may either be a login view injected with a login view model, a register user view injected with a register user view model, or a notes view injected with a notes view model. This window will only be allowed to close if it is hosting a login view. All view models inherit from the abstract base class ViewModelBase. The ViewModel base class implements the System Component Model iNotifyPropertyChanged interface and provides a protected setProperty method to change a property's backing field and raise the onPropertyChanged event. All view models utilize the relay command in some fashion. The relay command implements the System Windows Input iCommand interface and takes an action to invoke when the command is executed and a predicate used to determine if the command is enabled. The Edit Note View Model and the New Note View Model classes inherit from the Abstract Base class Note View Model Base, which inherits from the Abstract Base class View Model Base. These view models provide the functionality to edit existing notes and add new notes. The Note View Model Base class contains the common properties and methods shared by the Edit Note View Model and the New Note View Model classes. This includes the username and salted password, the note's title and text, the name of the consumer provider, a title editor control, and a close window command. The Edit Note View Model and the New Note View Model classes only have to implement the abstract Save Note command property to update or add a note respectively. The Login View Model allows the user to enter a username and a password and attempt to log in to the selected consumer provider. The Login View Model class provides the name of the connected consumer provider, the text and commands for the various buttons, and dodSON WPF user control editors to edit the username and password. It also provides a method to create and display the Notes view. The Notes View model displays all of the notes belonging to the logged in user. It provides the name of the connected consumer provider, the username, and a list of notes. It also provides commands to log out and add, edit, and delete notes. The Settings View model allows the user to select a consumer provider and then dynamically generates a provider editor using the Provider Editor View model. The Settings View model class provides a list of consumer providers, the name of the selected consumer provider, and the dynamically generated Provider Editor View. It also provides commands to attempt to connect to the selected configured consumer provider and close the window. The Provider Editor View model allows the user to edit a specific consumer provider's configuration settings by providing a dynamically generated user control. The editor function will dynamically create labels and dodSON WPF user control editors based on the contents of the provider's settings. The getEditor function will create a specific dodSON WPF user control based editor using the specified provider settings and inject it into a dodSON WPF User Control Editor's enhanced editor container, which provides graphical feedback and control to a dodSON WPF User Control Editor. See the dodSON Core Library Help file, dodSON WPF Namespaces, for more information about dodSON WPF editors. The Register User View model allows the user to create a new username and password to register with the selected consumer provider. The Register User View model class provides the name of the connected consumer provider, the text for the registered new user button, the dodSON WPF User Control Editor's enhanced editor containers containing the text editor and password editor used to edit the username and password respectively, and provides commands to register a new user and close the window. All of the views are WPF user controls and follow the same pattern. They call the initialize component method and set the user controls data context to the injected view model. The only divergence in this pattern is with the Notes View class, which adds some user interface methods to draw arrows and control sorting for the list view that displays the user notes. The views, of course, define the various user interfaces for the applications. For a more detailed review, download the dodSON Software Distributed Programming Framework example help file and the code projects seen in this video.